Here we go. Chapter 7, houses, starting with on page 91 with the seventh house. It is angular and masculine. The house signifies the generic other, being this house is the opposite of the first, which is the ascendant. In nativities, it is the house of marriage, conjugal and romantic relationships, and partnerships. The other may be personified by the spouse, fiance, dating relationship, etc., associates, business partners, as well as opponents and open enemies referenced by the tradition. This house defines, therefore, the dynamics of the relationships of the individual, how or he or she relates to others, the type of partner, how he or she deals with confrontation, and the nature of their opponents or enemies. In horary questions, the symbolism is practically the same. It represents the spouse and romantic situations, enemies, or the person being asked about. In particular, it defines the opponents in a legal case, the enemy in wars and duels, the thief in cases of theft, and fugitives in general. It indicates the doctor in questions about health and the consulting astrologer. It also indicates the destination of a trip, the point of arrival, in opposition to the ascendant, which represents the departure. In terms of colors, it signifies black, dark, and green hues. In a mundane horoscope, the seventh house represents the opponents, but in this case, it is the enemies of the country, kingdom, or people, as well as wars and conflicts. The part of the body attributed to the seventh house is located from the belly button to the hips. Eighth house, succedent and feminine. The eighth is a house of death and everything associated with it. In natal charts, it represents death, its nature, and all matters that involve death and loss. It, therefore, refers to wills, legacies, and inheritances. It is also associated with feelings of fear, worry, and angst, as well as with obsessions and in general somber and obscure states of mind. It likewise represents occult matters, ancient things, and ancestors in a broader sense than does the fourth. In another context, it also refers to the partner's resources, such as a dowry. The eighth house has identical meaning in horary and mundane astrology. In legal cases, it gives indications of the supporters of the opponent, and in battle, the resources and army of the enemy. With respect to colors, it is associated with green and black. The genitals and organs of excretion are the parts of the body represented by this house. Ninth house, cadent and masculine. The ninth house is associated with knowledge and matters of faith, religion, representing all manner of religious people, monks, priests, and pastors, as well as temples and churches. It is often called the house of God and is associated with long journeys. Additionally, the ninth house represents knowledge and education, having signification over schools, books, universities, and professors. Other topics associated with it are dreams, vision, and their interpretation in prophecy, stories, fables, and narratives of the past. Within this context, astrology itself is signified by this house. Journeys of long duration, in earlier times, travels by sea, and in foreign lands, and to foreign lands are other topics of this house. The house of pilgrimages is another name by which it is known. In natal astrology, the ninth house indicates the attitude of the individual in relation to knowledge and learning, as well as the treatment of religion or philosophy that is most in accord with the individual's nature. More specifically, it relates to the relatives of the partner. In horary and mundane astrology, I want to go back to that. It relates to the relatives of the partner. In natal astrology, the ninth house indicates the attitude of the individual in relation to knowledge and learning, as well as the treatment of religion or philosophy that is most in accord with the individual's nature. More specifically, it relates to the relatives of the partner. I hadn't heard that last line before. In horary and mundane astrology, the ninth house represents any matter associated with religion, knowledge, dreams, or travels. Specifically, in horary astrology, this house indicates an individual's knowledge or quality of such knowledge. The ninth house has white and green as its colors. In medical astrology, the ninth house represents the buttocks and the thigh. 10th house, angular and feminine. It's funny thinking of the 10th house as feminine when it's such like the midpoint or the thing that you're known for, or it feels like a very masculine place. So I'm excited to read this. Anyway, angular and feminine. The 10th house is the most elevated house in the horoscope. Just as with the fourth, it too has a very rich symbolism. It's associated with temporal power, with figures of authority, and with actions that have a social impact. In a nativity, the 10th house represents the actions of the native, his or her projects or objectives in life. It signifies the vocation, the career, the profession of the native, giving indications of its nature and quality. It is also representative of public life as well as of fame and social impact. In traditional terms, it indicates dignity, power, and distinction. One particular aspect of this house and its association with the mother, the feminine, in the same way that the fourth is associated with the father. In horary astrology, in addition to the significations already mentioned for natal astrology, the ninth house why is it talking about the ninth house and the 10th house? I'm just going to read it again. In horary astrology, in addition to the significations already mentioned for natal astrology, the ninth house additionally indicates topics having to do with power, figures of authority, governors, employers, managers, etc., the profession of this querent and its current state. In legal matters, it represents the judge and the verdict. I'm going to say that that is. Well, judges are ninth house. I'm wondering if that's a typo, though. Interesting. In mundane astrology, its principal representations are authority figures, kings and presidents, heads of state, dukes, princes, prefects, etc. And in general, the current state of the nation is associated with white and red. Anatomically, the 10th house represents the knees and thighs. Okay, moving on to the 11th house. You know what? Hold on. I have this little study guide that goes along with this book. And I'm wondering if I look at the houses in here, if it will say something about that. Except I don't look at this book enough, so I don't know exactly where everything is very quickly. That's the aspects. Describing a place. Ooh, delineation 1. Let's see. Under the beams. Let's see. Dignities. I think that they did dignities and abilities later in the study book. I think the study guide is laid out a little bit easier. Hold on. That's the planets. I feel like I just bypassed the houses. I did see something that was the planets. Okay. I found the houses. Let's see. House 10. Vocation, career, profession, fame and recognition, the mother. That's like really quickly, like very. This is a really good study guide, actually. But that's all it gives you. I mean, it's just like vocation, career, profession, fame, recognition, the mother. And there's no expounding on anything like they do in this other book. Okay. I'm going to say there's a typo. So, moving on to the 11th house, which is succedent and masculine. Let's see. This house is often called the good spirit because it is considered fortunate. In natal astrology, it represents friends and allies and those who support and help and the type of relationship that the native has with them. It is also the house of hopes, signifying one's dreams and expectations. In some ways, it also represents faith, not necessarily the religious in the religious sense of the word, but more as an optimistic expectation. Confidence and social recognition are likewise topics of this house. In horary astrology, the meanings are identical. The colors represented are saffron and yellow hues in general. In mundane astrology, the 11th house represents the favored counselors, allies of the king, and government. Within this context, it represents governing bodies such as the parliament, the state councils, and other legislators. Other mundane significations include the treasury, taxes, and finances of the country. In matters of war, it indicates the resources, army, and munitions of the head of state. With respect to the parts of the body, it represents legs and ankles. So now for our last house, the 12th house is cadent and feminine. The 12th house is a house of prisons and limitations, frequently called the bad spirit. In a nativity, this house also represents situations that limit and condition the native. It is associated with sadness, lamentations, tribulations, and afflictions. It is also the house of secret or hidden enemies. Those who do not know are our enemies. Those who we do not know are our enemies. Thus, envy, betrayal, and acts of sabotage are associated with the 12th house. Equally important topics are illicit acts, as well as prisons, enclosures, and cases of isolation in general. From another perspective, the 12th house also represents the conditions prior to birth. That is, what happened to the native while in the mother's womb. Because you know why? It is the house that was on the horizon while your mom was laboring. So it's that laboring point of the ascendant. You pop out, then the 12th house is above the ascendant, depending on which house system you use, right? The horary astrology, this house has identical meanings. In terms of color, the 12th house symbolizes green. Within a mundane context, this house represents the secret enemies of a country, nation, or institution. Thus, it may represent spies, saboteurs, criminals, and all manner of subversive agents. A less common signification of the 12th, valid in any of the astrological branches, is that of large animals. In this category are included domesticated animals of a larger size, such as horses, camels, cattle, and the like, or wild animals in general, traditionally beasts. In medical astrology, the 12th house represents the feet. I'm going to read this important note within the box. The diverse significations of a house should not be related to each other because they exist on different planes. For example, the 10th house represents the career, fame, and the mother, the individual, as significations. Nonetheless, it is incorrect to think that the mother has influence over the career or the fame of the individual. Similarly, siblings and short journeys have no relationship to each other, although both are signified by the 3rd house. Cool. Thank you. See you in the next one.